With this session, it's going to be fast and furious. The idea behind it is inspirational talks. So we've got inspirational talks from 4 of our panelists today, starting off with Mark. Mark's going to be talking to us about accelerating value delivery with Discipline Agile Toolkit. So he's going to be the first one up. And then we're going to get Jurgen to come back with mindful sense making. Then Jeff with the scaling Agile has never worked and never will. And then Brian finally will finish it off in the sessions, which is only going to be an hour in total, so 12 minutes each. Agile is a kind of post secrecy work. So, part of it is as you can see in the background with my TED talk, part of it is it's inspiring people. It's kind of putting out the message of how important this is. So with that, I'm going to start Mark off. I'm going to make him presenter, so he's going to be able to share his screen. And then logistically, if Mark, you have any problems, just let me know, and I will, I'm making you presenter now.
Okay, sounds good. Can you see my screen?
I can indeed. So I'm going to leave you with it. Good luck. Your 12 minutes starts now.
All right. Now I can see me. I can't see my screen. I can't see my PowerPoint.
I can't see your PowerPoint now, but it seems to have minimized. I don't know if it's on the screen.
Can you see it now?
I can see it now. It's perfect.
All right, good. Half a minute's gone. It's really hard to get through Discipline Agile in 12 minutes, but I'll give it a shot. I'm Vice President and co-creator of Disciplined Agile with Scott Ambler. We were acquired by the Project Management Institute in 2019, and we're absolutely thrilled to be part of this large not-for-profit organization, PMI. So if you think you know PMI, I think you probably don't. It's not your father's PMI. It's known as the Project Management Institute, a stodgy old company teaching people how to run projects in a waterfall fashion. That is not the new PMI. We've completely reinvented ourselves. In fact, that is a primary reason behind acquiring us, so that PMI could really have a say in the Agile space. Some people have, and I thought the conversation in the panel was interesting about potentially the word Agile going away. What happens then to the Agile Alliance? What happens to Discipline Agile if the word disappears? And how about the Project Management Institute? In this world where we're moving from projects to products, some people have said to me, Mark, you should rename the organization the Product Management Institute. Well, it's not going to happen for a number of reasons, but one of which is PMI absolutely has a large portion of their membership that are passionate about Agile, but a larger portion actually is concerned with traditional project management, and projects aren't going away. You have people have nothing to do with IT. They build bridges, they build skyscrapers in Dubai, they build pipelines. They have a beginning, they have an end, they're clearly projects. So it's good to have both, and that's what PMI has both. So we talk about making people's careers more enriching, helping them to grow, providing better compensation and opportunities for them. That's what PMI is about. And now that we have Discipline Agile, we have that solution there. So I wanted to blend in some context since we're celebrating the 20 years. And this is an executive, and he's going, like, are we there yet? Are we done? Are we Agile? I spent millions of pounds or dollars on frameworks and trainings and consultancies. I'm not really sure I'm seeing any benefit. Are we there yet? And there's some metrics behind this now, some data. Don Reifer surveyed 1,500 Agile teams, and the results aren't very good. I mean, an Agile method, 7 to 12% more productive. An Agile scaling framework, 3 to 5% more productive. Clearly, that's underwhelming. So we're not really meeting the promise that we had out there. So why are we still struggling? Why are we still debating about my method versus your method, what works and what doesn't? I think part of the reason is we're looking for simple solutions. You may have seen this quote: for every complex problem, there is an answer that's clear, it's simple, and it's wrong, right? So people are trying to find the easy answer. They want to buy a framework. They sometimes declare themselves as a certain kind of shop, like a safe shop or a Scrum shop or an XP shop. You can't buy agility. So being disciplined means lots of things, but I'm going to focus on investing to learn our options, optimizing your overall system for our situation, our context, and accelerating delivery value to our customers. So let's talk about learn for a second. we want to supercharge our skills. We really desperately need to do this. It's kind of embarrassing, actually, how much we invest on the Agile side of things in our personal development. I'll talk a bit more about that. But I do feel I need to address the Agile Manifesto. And I'm not suggesting we leave the Agile Manifesto behind. Just like we love it that we went from horses to the Ford Model T, I think we can agree that we can move on. I wouldn't want to drive one now. Same thing with the Agile Manifesto. If it was written by, as Brian said, written by software developers for software developers. Right, the very first line, we are uncovering better ways of developing software. And as Jürgen said, it's way more than software. Stuff before, stuff after, stuff around it. And also, one of the principles, deliver software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. I mean, come on, that's setting a pretty low bar. That used to be a big deal, an accomplishment. But now when you've got the Amazons of the world delivering many, many times a day, this clearly doesn't cut it anymore. So I think it's fair to move, not to move on, but to make it better. Like if we can amend the Constitution, why can't we amend the manifesto? But and in fact, we did in Discipline Agile. We came up with the Discipline Agile manifesto to add some of the things that Brian talked about and more. But we got some kickback from it, people calling us heretics because we're messing with the manifesto. And by the way, manifesto sounds kind of, I don't know, controversial. So what we've done is we framed these ideas and sort of updated some new ideas to make it just more embracing beyond software. Think about solution delivery. And I won't read all these, but in the principles, so principles, promises, and guidelines. In principles, we talk about how context matters and choice is good, agnosticism, pragmatism, and of course, delighting our customers. And being awesome, which is related to joy. In the promises section, some of my favorites are creating psychological safety and embracing diversity. Like we didn't have diversity when we built the Agile Manifesto. I think if we were to do it again, I would hope we would bring a more diverse set of backgrounds and individuals to that endeavor. Improving predictability, minimizing WIP, and all those kinds of things. In the guidelines, a couple of my favorites, create effective environments that foster joy. And I think it might have been Brian who mentioned joy. Yeah, Richard Sheridan wrote a great book, Joy Inc., and we incorporate some of his ideas into DA. And a shout out to Jürgen, change the culture by improving the system. The great stuff from Jürgen's Management 3.0 and his other works. The new role of leadership, that rather than managers, don't try to change the people. You got great people, but they're usually stuck in a bad system. Focus on improving the system. So these are sort of the way we think about a modernized version of the manifesto. So let's get into the learning aspect that I talked about. You and your teams have lots of options, lots of them, but do you know what they are? And do you know which ones work in different situations? We're under-investing in learning nowadays. Like I'm an old guy, I learned the UML, I taught it. I taught requirements management and iterative project management and object-oriented analysis and design. Seems like we don't learn that stuff anymore. We take shortcuts, and to be honest with you, I think we're being a bit lazy. So, if you look at the certification programs that are out there, they don't cover a lot of, I think, fundamental things like release planning, risk management, modern governance. I'm not talking about StageGate, I'm talking about agile or lean governance. The selection of methods or life cycles. We go to a Scrum certification or a SAFe certification or a Kanban or whatever it is. We have to have a dozen certifications on our LinkedIn profiles. Why can't we go somewhere and learn the variety of them in an agnostic, pragmatic way so I can pick the one that makes sense for me in my situation? So lots of stuff on the left isn't covered. And we don't have time to talk about DA, but I just want to show you just that there's a lot of material there. Like we talked about 53 different types of modeling. We're taught about stories and epics, but we're often not taught about personas, maybe some interesting UML ideas, other visual or textural modeling techniques. We would never want to use them all, but it's nice to know what they are so that we can cherry pick them, the ones that make sense for us. So this, I think of them like in the previous slide, the marketplace, right, of ingredients. And if you don't know what saffron is, then you're missing out. You're making some really good recipes. And that's what we need to do, is become better chefs. So, and people say, oh, Mark, it's too confusing. There's too much stuff out there. It's actually not. If you're doing Scrum, you're doing DA. It's a subset of it because Scrum is composed of practices and all those practices are in disciplined Agile. So Scrum is a recipe. composed of ingredients, but there aren't very many ingredients in Scrum. You know, it's described by a 13-page body of knowledge, the Scrum Guide, and that's fine because Ken and Jeff want us to go figure out architecture and testing and UX and all those kinds of things. That's the beauty of Scrum. But a lot of people don't know what their options are. So we have Scrum-based life cycles, Lean-based life cycles, exploratory, which is based on Lean Startup, continuous delivery flavors, and program for scaling situations. And just to give you an idea of how the content is organized, we have these things called goal diagrams, which are the selection of different strategies, practices, and so that you can easily find them if you're thinking about usage, fleshing out the usage of your solution. You might use epics or user stories. Story maps is another good technique, or you may use personas. And what we see in the body of knowledge is you have a definition of each of these, references out to where you can find more information, like one of Jürgen's books as an example, I'm sure we reference. And on the right-hand side, context, where this particular technique might help you. Like personas can help us build user experiences, build empathy with our users as an example. So it's a great learning tool, is what I'm saying. So move on to optimize. So imagine you invest in learning all these different strategies, so now you can cherry pick. How do you use it? Well, choice is good, right? And context counts. Ask yourself in your organization, are you following or are you leading? Are you a sheep or are you a wolf? And so just trying to bring up my phone here to see how much time I have left. Now, so you want to be a wolf. Look at the companies that you fear and what are they doing? Are they copying and pasting Spotify or are they becoming a Spotify? Are they learning ways of working that make sense for them? And if you look at the companies on the right, which of those companies do you think are using something like SAFe, copying and pasting and following prescriptive advice, or which ones do you think are saying, let's do what makes sense for us and how can we choose our way of working? And that's what we're suggesting. If you follow a framework, you're quickly going to run out of advice from that framework, and then where do you go? How do you improve? Well, you can use Kaizen, continuous improvement, retrospectives, and process experiments, many of which will fail. That's failing fast, and that's great. The quicker we fail, the quicker we learn, the quicker we improve. But that's an expensive and time-consuming process. You are unique, but you know what? A lot of what you've done has been done elsewhere. What if you looked at the body of knowledge to say, oh, this has been proven to help in this kind of situation, maybe I'll try that. That accelerates your learning and your process improvement. We call this guided continuous improvement. And the great news here is that you do not need to start from scratch. You start where you are. It's in place improvement. So start where you are, do the best that you can, always strive to get better. So I'm not saying stop doing Scrum, stop doing Kanban, stop doing SAFe, but I guarantee you that there are ideas in the toolkit you've never even heard of that will make you more effective. So I do not want you to become a disciplined agile shop. That's ridiculous. You're not a shop. You do many different kinds of things. SAFe might be one thing, but I guarantee you there's lots of teams that are not doing SAFe. They're being quite effective. So lastly, accelerate. We want to deliver more value to delight customers. And DA goes far beyond delivery. That's where this DA started, as disciplined agile delivery, high performance teams. But to be effective, the entire organization, the functional areas need to be agile as well, or you will not have long-term sustainable agility. So how do you make those other areas agile? Well, what we teach, we've been doing this, by the way. We don't just write books. I've been doing agile since it was before it was called agile. And we know that we have to help these other areas. So think about your IT delivery or value stream delivery. Is it flowing value to your customers, or are you getting your pipes clogged up? So quick examples as I wrap up here is that, I ask you to think if you've heard of these kinds of conversations. Your delivery team, finance says your funding runs out next month. I need you to create a business case, a project plan with estimates, and have it reviewed by the PMO before I can extend your funding for 3 months. And the team lead throws up their hands, but that means my teams will have to stop for several weeks to do this planning. They will be producing no value during this time. So question, is finance an impediment or an enabler to your agility? Obvious answer. HR, I urgently need another developer. HR, you will need a funding approved by finance, a requisition filled out, and internally posted the position for 2 weeks before we can start interviews. Okay, I'll skip release management, same idea. You got features every day, but your release management only deploys once a month or once a quarter. A couple more examples is data. Data says, no, I need a month turnaround before I'll approve that schema change. Finance, team lead says, can we stop doing timesheets? It's garbage. Nobody puts the right data in. Finance says it's important that we understand all tasks worked on and time spent so that we can properly create accounting entries for CapEx, OpEx. Have you heard that? I can tell you, you do not need to do timesheets. I think of one of the largest pizza companies in the world that has abolished timesheets because we train them on a better way to get the information without timesheets. Therefore, saving people time and just a little bit more agile. And by the way, a little bit more joy, because nobody likes timesheets. And a typical Scrum Master is taught to lead and help a team. They're not taught how to negotiate change with other areas so that they can choose their own ways of working and become agile themselves. So we need to take our coaching and our Scrum Masters up a notch. So to summarize, learn, better skilled teams deliver better results, quicker, happier, lower risk. You want to supercharge your skills of your teams. You want to optimize using these new tools, evolve beyond frameworks and methods. Ivar Jakobsen likes to say, we need to escape methods prison. Design your way of working to win, to be competitive, and then accelerate. Now that you've optimized your system or continue to optimize your system, DA can improve value streams and flow of value to the customers. You want to be nimble, improve flow, deliver more value to your customer. Okay, so there's the whirlwind example. And to summarize, the last 20 years versus the next 20 years, I do think we have to get beyond the names of frameworks and the certifications. And now, having said that, obviously we've got certifications for this, but I like to think that ours is a bit more robust and disciplined and credible. We need to teach our teams and enable them to choose the ways of working that make sense for them rather than be constrained by advice by some of these biased or myopic certifications and methods. All right, so that's it. Hopefully you found that useful.
That was absolutely amazing, Mark, and you did you kept to time. You did a whirlwind session, and it was absolutely fantastic. I loved it, and so thank you so much. And I can't wait for the questions to come in, and you join us back for the panel discussion later on.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Mark, so much for that. I'm now going to move over to our next speaker, who Mark nicely introduced previously, which is Jürgen, who's going to be talking to us today about mindful sense making. So I'll see you in a bit, Mark. Okay, the keys to the kingdom are over to you, Jürgen. Do you want to share your screen, and I'll just check everything technically is working? It is. Your 12 minutes starts now.
All right, you are seeing my screen. Mindful sense making. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the big pile of rubble that you see here is or was the house of my best friend in California. So imagine the situation. This was August last year. There was a light in the distance on the hills, and they were confused. What's going on there? There's fires in California, obviously. So confusion, state of confusion. Then an hour later, there was a helicopter flying above their heads, basically saying you have 30 minutes or 1 hour to get out of here because the fire is coming your way. That's obviously a crisis, right? Well, then you have no time for dot voting. What are the most important issues, objects to get in your car? So someone has to intervene and take charge. And now they are in a situation of rebuilding their house and dealing with insurance, which is a very complicated thing. So yet another way of dealing with the situation. And they are wondering what to do at all with living in California. Maybe we should just move elsewhere, and that's a complex discussion to have. So in a nutshell, with just one event, I have covered a couple of different domains, as some people would say, a different aspect of sense making. And sense making is a collaborative process of creating shared awareness and understanding out of individuals' perspectives and varied interests. I like that definition. It is trying to make sense of the world using different angles, basically trying to sometimes take a different stance toward the problem and see, what if how does it work out when I look at it from this place? Now, I'm sure out of the, let's see, 350 people who are watching now, thank you so much for joining us from all over the world. I'm sure some of you are familiar with this sense-making framework by Dave Snowden. Awesome stuff that Dave has been working on for the last 15, 20 years or even more with his Cynefin model. I very much appreciate if you use Dave's work. Of course, what I'm going to show you is inspired by him, but I have my own opinion, as I usually do, on terminology and visualization. So I offer you a different model, and I think that's good. I think it's good to have different perspectives. That is sense making itself. You have a choice of models, of frameworks out there, and I offer this one, and I'm going to lead you through it, and you decide whether you like this one or the other one, or there are other ways of doing sense making, but I leave that up to you. So we start with confusion. Some people would call that disorder. I don't like that word. I think the proper word would be confusion. You have no idea what is going on, such as, there's light over there behind the hills. Is that fire or not? That would be confusion. What do you do in a situation like that? You need more information. Just inquire, investigate, or whatever. You have conflicting signals. There's a fuzzy situation. You basically need to keep inquiring, keep interacting until meaning has formed when you are in the confusion state. Well, pretty quickly for our friends, meaning was formed because there was a helicopter flying above their heads and they ended up in crisis, but I'll get to that in a moment. Clarity is another way of approaching things. For me, that is the opposite of confusion. That's why it is on the other side of the circle. Some people call this obvious or simple. Again, I don't really like those terms. I prefer the word clarity. It is clear how you need to deal with that situation. At least that's what you think. You take the position that it is clear. For example, customer owes you money and you send an invoice. Obviously, after a couple of weeks, they still haven't paid, so you send a reminder. It's perfectly clear what to do in such situations. For many situations in life, we have these rules of thumb, of these standard practices, standard approaches. It's very obvious what we should be doing. Cause and effect is clear. You have a proper rule and you apply it to the situation. But there is a risk of bureaucracy and complacency. There is a risk of going too far with your rules. So you need to be aware that you're applying clarity, and sometimes you need to shift to another part of this circle. For example, sometimes things are convoluted. Now, in the Cynefin model, this is called complicated. I'm okay with the word complicated. I like the word convoluted even more because, for example, your code is often just by default, it's complicated. It takes some time to analyze and read and to understand how things work because it's a bit intricate matter to deal with. Convoluted would be even a step further. That would be when your code has technical debt in there, or where there are weird things happening. It's, oh, don't touch that line because it's a very important line of code. Then your code is not only complicated, it's convoluted. It's a step worse, I would say. What do you do in the convoluted domain? You need experts. You need specialists. You need someone just to analyze stuff and work rationally towards a decision. My finances are convoluted. I can tell you that I don't even understand everything. So I need an account manager for that. That is typically the stance that you take with things that are intricate and everything is wired together, and it takes some time to untangle everything. So complicated, convoluted, it's up to you which word to use. I like the word convoluted, but it's just difficult to understand the situation, but ultimately you can understand it. Now, for me, the opposite of convoluted, that's again why it is on the other side of the circle, is coherence. Systems that have coherence have a state that keeps them together. Like a group of people is a team when they have coherence. If there's no coherence, then they are not a team, they're just a group of people. You can call these, of course, the complex systems. Again, I'm okay with you using the word complex. I like the word coherence, but it's fine with me to use other words in this case. The cause and effect are only known in retrospect. I totally agree with the approach in the complex situations. You work with people very often. You need to just interact with everyone to see what is going on. The unknown unknowns, these are often called in this domain or this perspective of sense making. And this is typically the area where you need to run safe to fail experiments, because you don't know what will happen by just analyzing stuff. It's impossible. You need to probe, you need to launch an experiment and then see how the system responds. And then last but not least, crisis. Now, here's where I specifically disagree with the terminology in Cynefin, because in Cynefin this would be called chaos, chaotic, and I do not believe this is chaos. Chaos has a very specific meaning in complexity science and in mathematics. It is deterministic or disorder-based, deterministic randomness. That's not what we're talking about here, randomness. We're talking about a crisis situation. Just look at all the examples given in the Cynefin model of chaotic domain, and you read crises situations where someone has to take charge, someone needs to intervene. There's a helicopter flying there. Dad or mom has to take charge and get the kids out of the house, and there we go. Or you find out that you've been hacked, for example, as a company. Well, that's a crisis situation. Someone needs to take charge. And as I said, no time to do dot voting or whatever. You need top-down communication, re-establish order as quickly as possible. Basically, doing anything is better than doing nothing. So what we have here is a different picture, a different visualization of sense making. I'm pretty sure other people have yet their own visualizations, and that's cool, because that is what sense making is all about: different perspectives, different ways of approaching things. I'll give you one other example of how to work with this. Suppose you can't log into your company account anymore. You're confused. What's going on? I have no idea what's going on. Well, it turns out that the company has been hacked. Well, that's a crisis situation. Then you need to call in the experts. That would be convolution. What systems have been touched? What needs to be reset, rebooted, reformatted, etc. People need clear instructions. Change your passwords, etc. That's clarity, some rules that people need to follow. And finally, you might need a different culture of more security and more attention to security among the people, among the employees, because someone was not careful enough. That's coherence, that's interaction. So again, with just one example, we've touched upon all the aspects of sense making. Now, last but not least, it is very important that, and that's where Dave Snowden agrees with me, or I agree with him, it is not a categorization framework. It's not like, okay, so the situation is this, therefore I need to approach it like that. No, it is a choice. It is a choice of how you respond to a situation. One of my favorite examples is I was on vacation a number of years ago in a lodge, and one of the other tourists came out of her hut and said, there's a crisis, and oh my God, there was a crisis, and she was panicking. And it turned out that her favorite flavor of tea had run out in the hut. I don't think that was a crisis situation, to be honest, but she caused the crisis basically among the personnel. She chose to see that situation as a crisis and handled and respond accordingly. And then she created a crisis that wasn't actually there in the first place. So you have a responsibility of choosing where you operate, in which part of the circle. And nowadays, my partner and I always say, whenever we run out of something, there's a crisis, there's a crisis. We ran out of cookies. My God, there's a crisis. It has stuck with us, this way of responding. Anyways, crises are sometimes good for you. The benefits of crisis, Nassim Taleb wrote books about that. Sometimes things benefit from shocks, and it is good every now and then to suffer from a crisis. Some people will get better out of the COVID-19 crisis that the world has been plunged in last year. For some of us, it will be not nice to be in, but once you get out of it, it will be better. My friends will have a better house after the crisis, after having it burned down than before. I'm sure of it. So summarizing again, sense making, we need to build plausible maps of the shifting world. I offer you yet another map. Again, I'm okay if you use Cynefin or any other sense making framework. This is my model now that I like using. It makes more sense to me, tongue in cheek, with the visualization and the wording that I have chosen. And if you like it, feel free to go to this URL, bit.ly/shiftup-signup, where I have a ton of PDFs waiting for you, including the sense-making model, but also a tag cloud of all the values and principles of many different methods and frameworks in the Agile community, lean experiment template, values list, innovation vortex, and much more. So hopefully you found some of that interesting. And back to the moderators. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Incredible, and I'm sure Mr. Snowden would be very pleased with that. I know he took part in our virtual community event back in December, and he, they've just done a refresh on a book version, which he's very proud of. But Jürgen, that was an amazing session. I invite you back for some great Q&A in half an hour in the final session. So thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to move on to our next speaker. All the way actually representing the UK. So Mark, are you okay to take the stage? And see you later on, Jürgen. Okay, so here we go. So Mark, hopefully you're there. You're currently on mute, but if you want to just come off mute and, oh no, sorry, it's not Mark, it's Jeff. I'm just, it's never always right on the night is the saying they say. So let's go over to Jeff. Right, Jeff, are you with us?
I am, yes, and
Wonderful.
hopefully. So I just need to switch this over, right? Whoop.
Yeah, just switch it over, and I can see your screen. If you want to put on your webcam as well, then at least people can see you. If not, you can hide away, and I will let you start. Perfect. You're looking good. Go for it.
Well, I don't go that far, but thank you. Yeah. So my talk is hopefully not going to be too dark. It's a little bit tongue in cheek. It's not about a new model or a framework or anything like that as such. It's a little bit of my experience and a bit of prediction, if you like. So looking back over the last 20 years and saying that in my experience, there is no example of scaling Agile that has ever worked. And again, just from my experience, to be brutally honest, I don't really hold out any hope for scaling Agile in the next 20 years either. But I don't intend it to be as depressing as that might sound. So again, my experience that this as soon as it came out, I can remember talking to my colleagues at BT thinking, well, we've got this working well in a couple of teams here and there, but what about this big beast that is our organization? And that's been the holy grail for every company really since. And so much so that they've been willing to pay extortionate amounts of money to consultants here and there to help them. And it's not that they want the wrong thing, or it's not that anyone's acting disreputably. It's just trying to help those teams achieve something that's very, very difficult. And since then, I've been guilty of this as well. Every conference that you'll go to, you'll see, whether in person or online, you'll see and hear case studies of our journey, our Agile transformation. None of them have ever finished. None of them have ever been successful. There's always, we're not quite there yet. and some of those organizations take quite a few steps back shortly afterwards. And I think that's arguably why, you know, things like the scaling frameworks have really taken hold. I've got a bit of a confession to make, and I don't really, I'm not going to say this is something consciously. It's something that sort of rose up through my unconscious over the years, and it's that I think if I really was honest with myself, back at BT, when I was back at the turn of the century, I'm pretty sure at some level I knew it would never scale, but I didn't want to admit that to myself. And I think this is the biggest secret that's been kept by Agile coaches, that Agile actually will scale, that Agile actually does scale. I think we've all known this. Part of us probably wants to believe that eventually someone will work it out and we could pick it up from them. Maybe we're just scared of admitting it to ourselves, because actually if we admit that it can't work at the enterprise level, perhaps we'll be stopped from doing things at any level, and all the things that we're doing at the team level would cease to be. Whatever reason, I think we've hidden away from the reality there, and that's why you've seen things like this. You've seen the horrendous tube maps and the pages and pages of this, that, and the other all coming together to make some nightmare frameworks that sing out and try and appeal to those who are looking for someone to tell them it'll be all right. And the organizations that I've seen go down these routes, they've got good intentions. No one is trying to deliberately sabotage their organization. They just don't have a knowledge or experience of what to do. So they look for someone who says, this is how we can do it. And it's hope. It's hope. And again, I don't even really blame the people who are coming up with these things, because it's all with good intention. But I think we've all got to be a little bit more honest with ourselves and say, if we're going to do this properly, we need to walk the talk. I think we need to use an Agile approach to be Agile. And what does that mean? Well, I think it means not pinning your colors to a particular mast and selling the hell out of it, or buying the hell out of it. This, I didn't ask Kerry's permission to post this. I feel bad for this, actually, but this was a long time ago. A colleague of mine at BT posted this, and this was, like I said, a long time ago, and yet we still had this level of cynicism that it would never work. He posted this as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment about the situation at a big enterprise level attempt at becoming more agile. And it's something that, you know, every large organization that I've been to can really relate to. This idea that actually, yeah, we would like to focus on individuals and interactions, but you know, we need processes and tools to control how those individuals, or what we prefer to call resources, interact. And it's kind of saying self-organize like this. And that sort of half-assed attempt is, again, not malicious, it's not malevolent, it's the best efforts that we've had with good intentions, but really struggling to be successful. And one of the things that I think we talked about in the panel discussion, and something that, you know, Jürgen was talking about when sort of making sense of things, is that Agile is a solution to a problem. It absolutely is. And for certain questions, you know, Agile approaches are absolutely the right answers. And I don't think you could really deny that over the last 20 years, there have been more and more of the questions for which Agile is the right answer to, because things have been getting more complex, because things have been getting faster, because feedback cycles need to shrink. But waterfall's not going away, and it shouldn't. Agile will probably never go away either, but equally, it will never be the one way to do things, ever. So it's about, over the last 20 years, getting this tacit acceptance that actually it's not about transforming or transitioning or moving from waterfall to Agile. It's about getting that appropriate balance. And I like to use one of the words that Jürgen uses, which is around coherence, but perhaps not in the context that he was using it in his model there. And this idea of the model that we use, the metaphor that we think of when we think of our organizations, it's no longer that mechanical metaphor that dominates anymore. It's still an element of it, but it's a lot more organic now. It's a lot more around resilience rather than robustness, to use some of the other terms that people have already mentioned. And I would say that I've yet to see an organization And I would be very surprised if I ever do, where they find themselves in an environment where they're just focused on efficiently processing a set number of inputs to try and get a predictable, repeatable product out really, really efficiently. And that's all they do. Equally, I don't think I'm ever going to see an organization that doesn't need to focus a little bit on efficiency at times rather than effectiveness. What's interesting for me is the conversations that I'm having now compared to what I was having 10 years ago is I'm not necessarily coming in and trying to talk to leaders about, have you heard this thing about Agile? It might be useful for you. I don't need to do that. They're asking me about Agile, and in some ways, I'm trying to get them to slow down. I'm trying to get them to calm down and think a little bit more about, well, what is your context? What's useful for you? What's working for you? Where are you right now? What's not working for you in your situation? And once you understand your context, do you have the range of responses, the range of leadership styles, the range of processes that you can flex to make sense and deal with what you're facing, rather than try and put all your eggs into one basket? How am I doing on time? Okay. So a big message for me is that not only are ways of delivering products changing, but I think culture is changing. This idea that historically we've led from the top. Organizations have quite rightly led from the top because the dominant metaphor was one of expertise. Leaders had risen to their position because they knew more. They had greater skill, they had greater experience. And it was quicker and easier to tell people that were less experienced what the right answer is. But if we weren't getting the right results, then we needed to change our actions. Because we wouldn't, so the first sign of madness, or the third sign of madness, is doing the same thing and expecting different results. We would do something different, but when you're operating in an environment, as Jürgen was talking about there, around greater complexity, where the cause and effect is not necessarily easily understandable in advance, it's very difficult to say with confidence that if I change my actions, I'm going to get different results. And we can't afford, even if our leaders still had the greatest level of expertise, we can't afford the time it would take to escalate those decisions up the pyramid and back down again, because someone else would have done something a lot quicker by that time. So we need autonomy. And autonomy is a scary thing, because as Spider-Man didn't say, with great autonomy comes great inconsistency, or potential for inconsistency. From a leadership perspective, I think I mentioned this earlier on, there's a great fear about what am I supposed to do if I'm not meant to know the answer anymore? How do I provide leadership without looking weak? And this redefinition of strong leadership is probably the number one thing that I work with leadership teams on. It's not about knowing the right answers anymore. It's about creating the conditions where people can find the right answers, whether that is through following processes or working things out with expertise and analysis, or whether it's through finding things out through experimentation. That is a scary concept still, even 20 years later. But one thing that I think I found really interesting is we can use motivation, or more accurately, we can use demotivation, motivational debt, not just as something to aim towards so that we can have joy in our work and attract and retain talent, but also we can see that as a signal that something's not quite right, that we're not coherent, that what people are expecting or needing, they're not getting. Because if I would come to you as a leader and say, go for it, self-organize, but you don't feel you have the skills, the experience, or the safety to do it, you're going to be scared. Motivational debt. Equally, if you do feel you have the ability and the experience and the safety to do something autonomously, but I don't give you the space to do it, you're going to have motivational debt. So tapping into how people are feeling within the organization, it's a great source of indications for the leaders as to what to do next. The one thing that I've really struggled with from a word perspective, so Jürgen was saying how he was preferring certain words to other things. The one word that I've been guilty of using over the years, and I wish people would stop using, is transformation, because it implies that there is an end. There is a state that we're working towards. It's known. I don't believe that. I think the evidence is saying that's not the case. You may think that you want to be this type of organization, but you can't be sure that the circumstances that you're envisaging in 3 months, 6 months, 3 years' time are going to be like that. So instead of transforming, we need to be continually transitioning. And that's a scary concept as well, because humans crave certainty. They crave closure. So as leaders, how can we prepare people for that? We need effectiveness and efficiency. We need planning and responsiveness, something that I think didn't really come through in our appreciation of the manifesto signatories. It's not one or the other, it's both. They said that 20 years ago, it's still relevant now. This is why we shouldn't be trying to scale an agile organization, but continually coherent and resilient one. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. And I know for those who've been attending some of the other Agile20Reflect Festival events, you will have probably heard Dean, who did actually, come up with scaling agile or safe, asking why he wasn't invited to the original signing of the manifesto. Now, the next speaker, inspirational speaker, was invited, and he is going to share his presentation, and we're going to have Jeff come back to answer some of those really hard questions after our final session of the day. So I'm going to hand over now to, well, he doesn't need any introduction, but to Brian, and hopefully, Brian, you'll be able to share your screen, and we can have the final lightning inspirational key speech from the one and only Brian. And I can see your slides now. If you want to throw on your webcam, then your time will start.
In theory, my webcam is on. Let me. How's that?
It's in, so you're all ready to go, and I'll see you in 15 minutes.
Oh, I thought it was 12. That's interesting. Two confessions right now. One is the original topic of the talk didn't work, so this talk is on another topic. The other confession is that I thought this was a 15-minute time slot, and earlier he said it was 12, so I messed that up, and so I've quickly made a few changes, and I'm responding to change, and we'll try to make this done in 12 minutes. My parents are German, so I am not allowed to run long. Okay, something that people used to say back in the old days of Agile, early days of Agile, especially early days of Scrum, was a distinction that was based on a joke, and it's not a particularly good joke, but the joke goes like this. A chicken comes to a pig and says, "Let's start a restaurant and we'll call it Ham and Eggs." And the pig declines, saying that whereas you, the chicken, would be involved, I would be committed. That is, the chicken just provides eggs, the pig has to provide meat, and that's obviously a greater commitment. And the way this was used back in those days was people on the development team were referred to as pigs, and everyone outside the development team was referred to as chickens. Now, this phrase has rightly gone out of style, out of favor, but I want to talk through why that phrase mattered then and how something like it might matter today. So back in the bad old days, say around 1990, it was customary for the chickens, the people outside the team, to tell the team what it was that they were supposed to do in considerable detail, how they were supposed to do it in a fair amount of detail, and when they had to have it done with a precise date. And this was quite a bit of pressure for the teams because it was often impossible to succeed under those circumstances. Now, the reason the business, let's say, was doing this was because software development teams, well, there are two reasons. One is that it was the tradition of those days that a manager's job was to tell other people how to do their job. Jeff alluded to this in his last talk. But a larger reason was they were trying to get some sort of insurance, some way to reduce the risk that the team wouldn't deliver by telling them how and what and when to do things in very great detail. Now, this didn't actually work, and from that, Agile was created. And Agile, as I mentioned earlier, came from several different threads, but one sort of prototypical thread was the type of project that a company started by telling a team that last project was a complete disaster. You go and try to recover something from this disaster. Just try and give us something. And the result of that was the how basically went away. Do whatever you want, just try and give us something. And the what and the when were greatly diminished in the sense that what evolved was the sort of iterative type of process that we have now, where a team gives you something when they can give it to you, and then you say, that's good, give us something more. Now, in the days of early Agile, we were transitioning from that very command and control style to the modern Agile style, and the chickens and pigs comes in because it was extremely easy for the chickens, the people who had been in the business, whose job had been to direct teams in a lot of detail, easily fell into the habit of directing teams in a lot of detail. And because teams are generally fragile things, they were easily broken by such an effort. And the chicken and pigs metaphor was something that people could use to help with that. I myself, for example, once I was on a consulting gig and I talked to the vice president of development and told him the chickens and pigs story and talked about a lot of things. And then we had a planning meeting, a kind of a heavyweight planning meeting, as was the style then. And this VP of development slipped into the habit of saying things like, but couldn't you do this? Or, but it can't really take that long, and so on and so forth. And I, with a little bit of fear, said, don't forget you're a chicken. And he, being a good guy, said, you're right, I'll be quiet. And he was quiet from then on. So that's the power of a catchy metaphor. Now, things have changed. We're now in 2021. The ideal team is aligned with the company goals. They are involved in understanding the customer and all of the sort of things that you hear about these days. They want to deliver business value, not merely features, not to just be a feature factory, as they call it. And so as a result, everybody is now marching forward together, like these people in the picture, where you have the Red Army soldier smiling, and you've got the peasant in his straw hat and he's smiling, and you've got the machinist with his goggles, and everybody's working together. And so we don't need to have that kind of devices, us versus them rhetoric anymore. However, one thing that I've noticed, actually this has been a kind of true all along, is that a team that's aligned with the business and is going for business value can easily try to do more than they're actually capable of doing well. and they can easily talk themselves into going faster than they actually can. And the result is that they do sloppy work and end up paying for it later. So my idea is that we're all pigs now. We're all kind of fat and happy and working together, but we are in some sense haunted by the ghosts of chickens past who are whispering in our ear, faster, faster, more, more, the way the actual chickens of Scrum in the early days did. So I would like to establish this meme, if you will, of the ghost chicken, so that when people are tempted on a team or outside a team, who cares, to try and do too much, to try and go too fast, to try and make the code worse in order to get something faster, you can say ghost chicken and it will have the same effect as chicken did for me. Okay, another problem with this sort of scheme, and this is where I'm gonna rush through to get done in time, is that people are not great at working consistently toward abstractions like business value or such. People work for other people. We are social animals. We are primates. We work to gain the self-esteem and support of our network of primates, nearby primates. And one of the main ways that we achieve this is through what's called gift economies. Now, if you're in software, and especially if you've been in software around open source, your idea of what a gift economy is probably wrong, because the gift economies that have been talked about in software are in fact from anthropological studies of gift economies that were in the process of collapsing under new societal stresses and were failing and behaving pathologically and badly. So what you learn from them is not something that's useful for creating a sustainable society. I'm not going to go through in time, because of time, for the 3 characteristics of gift economies, but I'll mention them here, I'll show you them here, and you can look at a book, which I'll get to later. The relevance of this is that people who study people have noticed that even though we are in a money economy where we do work for a salary, we just exchange money for work. In fact, things like software development teams or groups in offices or all kinds of groups of people have gift economies hidden inside them. A lot of what's actually going on has some of the same dynamics as gift economies, but those dynamics are hidden and they're generally operate poorly because we have this imagination, we have this idea that we're just independent individuals producing business value in exchange for money, rather than that we are social animals working in a social scene to do all the things that social animals and primates want out of life, which is the esteem of other people and other things. So I mentioned that most things you hear about gift economies are in fact wrong. This book is, and I'm not an expert, but this book is a book on gift economies that I found very helpful toward an anthropological theory of value by David Graeber, who sadly died later last year. So my message here is it's a good idea if people out there learn about gift economies, and I'm done.
That is an amazing timekeeping. I don't know if anyone can, and also the fact that you managed to be agile and edit your slides as you go along is impressive, Brian. I'm truly impressed. And I noticed you putting your Twitter handle on there, and I've just been on your Twitter account and noticed you've got a whole stack of posts on there. So definitely reach out to him. I've added him onto the map, and we're now joined. Thanks so much, Brian. You hopefully you're going to stay on for the big Q&A, which will be in about half an hour or so. It'd be great to have you. So thanks again for your session. It was brilliant.